I still can't believe I'm typing these words. My hands are shaking so badly that I've had to delete and retype this opening paragraph 3 times. 7 years of my life. 7 years with Daniel. Gone in an instant when I discovered he'd been systematically draining our joint savings account for the past 18 months. It started with a notification from our bank about an unusual transfer. I thought it was a mistake at first. 300 moved to an account I didn't recognize. When I called Daniel at work, he brushed it off, saying he'd explain when he got home. Something in his voice sounded off, but I trusted him. God, I trusted him so completely. When he walked through the door that evening, he didn't even take off his coat. He just stood in our entryway, the same spot where we'd shared thousands of goodbye kisses and welcome home hugs, and told me he'd been planning his exit strategy for over a year. Exit strategy. I remember repeating the words, feeling like I was suddenly in some corporate meeting instead of my living room. From what? From us, Megan. From this relationship. I felt like I'd been punched. The air left my lungs as he explained, almost clinically, that he'd been transferring money, our money, the savings we'd built together for our future home, into a separate account, his account. Almost $47,000 in total. When I asked him why, what I'd done wrong, his answer shattered whatever was left of my heart. You're just not smart enough with money, Meg. You're too financially naive. I need someone I can build a real future with, someone who understands investments and assets. He looked around our apartment, the home we'd created together, with such disdain. I can't keep carrying you. I deserve better. I remember sinking onto our couch, the one we'd picked out together at that warehouse sale 3 years ago, both of us so excited about our first, ground-up, furniture purchase. You've been stealing from me, I whispered. I've been protecting my future, he corrected, as if I was a child who didn't understand basic concepts. The lease is in my name anyway. I'll give you 2 weeks to find somewhere else to stay. 2 weeks. After 7 years together, I had 2 weeks to dismantle my life. That was 4 days ago. I've been staying at my sister Kate's place since then, sleeping on her pull-out sofa and trying to make myself as small as possible in her already cramped one-bedroom apartment. She's been amazing, but I can see the worry in her eyes when she thinks I'm not looking. I overheard her on the phone with our mom last night. I'm scared for her, Mom. It's like she's just empty. And I am. I feel hollow, like Daniel reached inside and scooped out everything that made me. The worst part is that I'm starting to wonder if he was right. Maybe I am financially naive. Maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe I don't deserve better. I gave him everything. I supported him through law school, working 2 jobs while he studied. I was the one who cooked meals when he was preparing for the bar exam, who listened to him practice arguments late into the night. I planned our vacations, remembered his mother's birthday, kept our home running while he built his career. I thought we were partners. I thought we were building something together. But apparently, I was just a stepping stone, a convenient support system until he could afford someone better. I don't know what to do now. I'm 32 years old and I feel like I'm starting from scratch. The money is gone. He made sure the transfers were just under the amount that would trigger fraud alerts. And since we weren't married, the bank says there's little I can do legally. My name wasn't on the lease of our apartment because Daniel insisted it made more sense for him to be the primary tenant with his more stable income, even though I've been at the same publishing house for 5 years. This morning, something in me snapped. Maybe it was Kate gently suggesting I eat something, or maybe it was seeing Daniel post a carefree Instagram story from our favorite brunch spot with friends. As if nothing had happened, I found myself Googling financial theft unmarried couples and calling a legal aid office before I could talk myself out of it. The consultation was brief and disheartening. The lawyer, a kind-eyed woman named Serena, explained that without marriage or a cohabitation agreement, I had limited options. The law hasn't caught up with how people actually live, she said, frustration evident in her voice. But that doesn't mean you can't fight back in other ways. When I asked what she meant, Serena leaned forward. Document everything. Gather evidence of your contributions to that money, pay stubs, emails discussing joint savings goals, anything showing it was intended as shared funds. It might not be enough for court, but it creates leverage. I left with a knot in my stomach, but also something I hadn't felt in days, a spark of determination. I spent the afternoon creating a folder on my laptop labeled Eva DNC and digging through years of emails and bank statements. I may have been financially naive, but I'm not stupid, and I'm not going down without a fight. I keep replaying every conversation we ever had about money, about our future. Was I really so blind? Did I miss the signs that he saw me as a liability rather than a partner? Yesterday I found an old birthday card he gave me 2 years ago. To my forever, he'd written inside. I ripped it into tiny pieces, then sat on Kate's bathroom floor and cried until my throat hurt. I don't know how to move forward from this. I don't know who I am without him. I don't know if I'll ever trust anyone again. If you've been through something like this, please tell me it gets better. Please tell me I'll feel like myself again someday. Because right now I'm not sure that person exists anymore. 6-month update, small steps on shaky ground. It's been exactly 6 months since I posted here, and I wanted to update you all because your comments and messages quite literally saved me during those first dark weeks. Thank you doesn't seem adequate, but it's all I have. I'm writing this from my own apartment. It's tiny, a studio with a kitchenette and a bathroom where you can practically shower while sitting on the toilet, but it's mine. The security deposit wiped out most of what I had left in my personal savings, but waking up in a space that's entirely my own feels worth every penny. The first month after Daniel's betrayal was a blur of tears and legal consultations that went nowhere. After my third lawyer told me essentially the same thing, that without marriage or written agreements, I had little legal recourse. I realized I needed to change strategies. I couldn't get the money back, but I could make damn sure I'd never be vulnerable like that again. So I made what I now call my Phoenix Plan, a 3-part strategy for rising from the ashes: financial education, career advancement, and social rebuilding. It sounds impressive now, but at the time, it was just a desperate attempt to focus on something other than the gaping hole in my chest. For the financial part, I signed up for every free workshop I could find. The first one was excruciating. Sitting in a community college classroom surrounded by people who seemed to instinctively understand terms I was frantically Googling under the table. I almost left at the break, but then the instructor said something that stopped me. Financial abuse is one of the most common and least discussed forms of domestic violence. I wasn't alone. This had a name. The first couple of months after Daniel's betrayal are still a blur. I remember Kate practically forcing me to eat, to shower, to leave the apartment for brief walks around our neighborhood. I remember calling in sick to work so many times that my boss finally sat me down for a serious conversation about my future at the company. That was the wake-up call I needed. I couldn't lose my job too. 3 months ago I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Lin. Our first session, I could barely speak through my tears. By our third session I was angry. A seething, white-hot rage that surprised even me. Good. Lin had said, anger means you're starting to value yourself enough to be outraged by how you were treated. She suggested I start journaling about my relationship with Daniel, not just the end, but all of it. At first, I resisted. Reliving those memories felt like pressing on a bruise. But once I started, I couldn't stop. 7 years of memories poured out of me, and as I reread what I'd written, patterns emerged that I'd been blind to before. The way Daniel would sigh when I asked him to explain investment terms. How he'd take over conversations about our finances, telling me not to worry my pretty little head about it. The subtle digs about my career choice. Publishing is so noble, even if it doesn't pay well. The way he'd check the grocery receipts and question my purchases. How he convinced me to put my modest inheritance from my grandmother into our joint account for safekeeping. Dr. Lin calls it financial abuse. She says it's a form of control that's often overlooked because it's not as visible as other types of abuse. I'm still struggling with that label. Abuse feels like such a heavy word, and part of me still wants to believe that Daniel loved me, that he just made a terrible mistake. But then I remember the look on his face when I confronted him with the evidence I'd gathered. Emails where he'd acknowledged my contributions to our savings, texts where we discussed our future home. He'd actually laughed. No judge is going to care about some texts, Megan. He was right about the legal system, but wrong about me. Those receipts weren't just for a potential court case. They were for me. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that what we had was real even if his feelings weren't. Last month I ran into one of our mutual friends, Tara, at a coffee shop. I almost ducked out before she saw me, but she caught my eye and came over. It was awkward at first. She and her husband had been closer to Daniel than to me. But then she surprised me by asking if I wanted to join her book club. I always enjoyed our conversations at dinner parties, she said. Daniel tended to dominate the conversation, but whenever you spoke up, you always had the most interesting perspectives. I hesitated, suspecting pity, but then realized this was exactly what the social rebuilding part of my Phoenix Plan called for. Actually, I'd love that, I said, and pulled out my phone to add the details to my calendar. And maybe we could grab coffee sometime. I've been meaning to expand my social circle. The words felt foreign in my mouth. I'd let Daniel handle our social calendar for so long. But Tara's genuine smile told me I'd made the right move. I didn't realize until that moment how much I'd internalized Daniel's assessment of me. In his version of our relationship, I was the quiet, financially naive girlfriend who needed guidance and protection. But in Tara's memory, I was someone with valuable thoughts and insights. I joined the book club. It meets every other Thursday at a local wine bar, and for 2 hours, I get to be just Megan. Not Daniel's ex, not the woman who was too stupid to notice she was being robbed, just me. Last week, I made a comment about the unreliable narrator in the novel we were discussing, and the entire group nodded in agreement. Such a small thing, but it felt enormous. Work has been a lifeline too. I threw myself into a manuscript that had been sitting on my desk before the breakup. A memoir by a woman who hiked the Pacific Crest Trail after losing her mother. Her journey from grief to self-discovery resonated with me in ways I couldn't have understood 6 months ago. I stayed late editing it, pouring all my focus into helping shape her story. Last week, my boss called me into her office, and I was sure she was going to reprimand me again for my earlier absences. Instead, she praised my work on the memoir and offered me a promotion to senior editor. Your edits on the PCT memoir showed remarkable insight, she said. You found emotional depths in that manuscript that even the author hadn't fully articulated. I almost said no out of habit, but caught myself. This was the career advancement, part of my plan. Actually, I said, surprising myself with my boldness, I've been thinking about specialized memoir editing. There's a real market for trauma narratives that offer genuine hope without veering into toxic positivity. I'd like to develop more titles in that space. My boss looked startled, then intrigued. Put together a proposal, she said. I'd like to see what you have in mind. I spent the weekend drafting that proposal, drawing directly from my own experience of seeking authentic stories of recovery. When I submitted it Monday morning, it felt like I was finally using my pain for something constructive. I almost said no. Daniel's voice was in my head. Publishing is a dead-end career. But I caught myself. This voice wasn't mine. I accepted the promotion on the spot. Not everything is better. I still have nights where I wake up at 3 a.m., my mind racing with questions about what I could have done differently. I still flinch when I check my bank account. I'm still not ready to date. The thought of being vulnerable with someone new makes my stomach churn. And then there's the Instagram post I saw last week, Daniel with a woman named Alexis, both of them dressed up for some charity gala. She's gorgeous. Sleek blonde hair, designer dress, perfect smile. According to her profile, she's a financial analyst at a prestigious firm. His caption, "Finally found my equal." It felt like being punched all over again. I spiraled for 3 days after seeing that post. I cyberstalked Alexis until I knew her alma mater, her previous employers, even her favorite brunch spots. I drafted and deleted a warning message to her a dozen times. I pictured them laughing about me. Poor, naive Megan who didn't understand investments and assets. On the third night, I found myself standing in front of my bathroom mirror, mascara streaked down my face, holding my phone with the Instagram post still open. "What are you doing?" I asked my reflection. This wasn't part of the Phoenix plan. This was letting Daniel control my emotions even now. I deleted Instagram from my phone that night. Not forever, but until I could look at his life without feeling like I was drowning. It was a small act of self-protection, but it felt like the first truly clear-headed decision I'd made in weeks. I spent that night crying into my pillow, feeling like all my progress had evaporated. If he's so happy with his perfect, financially savvy new girlfriend, then maybe he was right about me all along. Dr. Lin reminded me in our next session yesterday that social media is a highlight reel, not reality. And even if he is happy right now, she said, that doesn't invalidate your worth or your journey. I'm trying to believe her. I'm trying to trust that the small steps I'm taking, my new apartment, the promotion, the book club, the days when I don't think about Daniel until evening falls, are leading me somewhere better than where I was. 6 months ago, I asked if it gets better, if I'd ever feel like myself again. I still don't have a definitive answer. But I'm starting to think that maybe I don't want to be my old self again. Maybe I'm becoming someone stronger, someone who won't give away her power so easily. I'm not there yet, but for the first time since that night in our entryway, I believe I might get there someday. 1 year update, finding my footing. It's been a year. Sometimes it feels like a decade has passed since Daniel walked out of my life. Other times, the wound still feels fresh enough that I catch myself holding my breath against the pain. But I promised an update, and so much has happened that I hardly know where to begin. I'll start with work, because that's been the most consistent bright spot. The memoir I mentioned in my last update. It hit the New York Times bestseller list last month. My author sent me a handwritten note that I've framed on my wall. Thank you for seeing the strength in my story when I couldn't see it myself. I read those words every morning as I get ready for work, and they remind me that I'm good at what I do, regardless of what Daniel thought of my career. The proposal I submitted for specialized memoir editing has evolved into something bigger. I'm now leading a small team focused on what we're calling resilience narratives. My boss took a chance on me because, as she put it, you have a unique ability to identify authentic emotional journeys. What she doesn't know is that I've been using my own experience as a template. For each manuscript, I ask, does this ring true? Does it acknowledge the messiness of healing? Does it offer hope without sugar coating the struggle? My personal criteria have become our imprint's unofficial manifesto. Last month, I pitched a workshop series for our authors called Turning Pain into Prose. It's designed to help writers transform their personal traumas into compelling narratives without self-exploitation. When my boss approved it, I felt a surge of vindication. Daniel had dismissed my career as insignificant, but here I was, creating something meaningful precisely because of what I'd been through. My promotion came with a significant raise, enough that I was able to move from that tiny studio to a one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood I love. It's still modest, but it has a small balcony where I've started growing herbs and flowers in colorful pots. There's something deeply satisfying about nurturing these little plants, watching them thrive under my care. On Sunday mornings, I sit out there with my coffee, feeling the sun on my face, and I think this is mine. No one can take this from me. The book club has expanded into a genuine friendship circle. Tara and I have grown especially close. Last month, she confided that she and her husband had always felt uncomfortable with how Daniel treated me. We should have said something, she admitted over wine one night, but Mark and Daniel were college roommates, and Mark didn't want to rock the boat. It was both validating and painful to hear that others had seen what I couldn't, or wouldn't, see. I never understood what he saw in you. Tara continued, then immediately covered her mouth. God, that came out wrong. I meant that you were always so bright and curious, and he seemed to want to dim that somehow. Her words unlocked something in me. Did you know him before me? I asked. What was he like in college? Tara hesitated. Different, actually. More insecure. His family struggled financially. His dad lost their house in the 2008 crash. Daniel worked 2 jobs through undergrad and was obsessed with financial security. This new information didn't excuse what he'd done, but it added dimension to the man I thought I knew completely. I remembered how anxious he'd get when bills came due, how he'd check our account balances daily. His betrayal was still unforgivable, but for the first time I could see it as part of a larger pattern of fear rather than simple cruelty. Through Tara, I've reconnected with old friends and made new ones. We go hiking on weekends, try new restaurants, attend local art shows. Last weekend, we went to a financial literacy workshop at the community college. A year ago, I would have been too intimidated to attend, convinced I wouldn't understand anything. But the workshop was illuminating, and I realized that my problem was never a lack of intelligence. It was that Daniel had deliberately kept me in the dark, making financial matters seem more complicated than they were so I'd remain dependent on him. With my new knowledge and my improved salary, I've started rebuilding my savings. It's nowhere near what Daniel stole, but watching the numbers grow each month gives me a sense of security I haven't felt in a long time. I've even started a small investment portfolio with the guidance of a financial advisor. A woman who patiently answers all my questions without a hint of condescension. But the biggest change in my life came about 3 months ago, when I literally collided with someone at the farmer's market. I was examining heirloom tomatoes, not watching where I was going, when I backed straight into a man carrying a precarious stack of produce. Apples went rolling everywhere and I was mortified. As we scrambled to retrieve the runaway fruit, he made a terrible joke about how we'd have to make applesauce now, and I found myself genuinely laughing for what felt like the first time in ages. His name is Leo, and he's a high school history teacher with a passion for cooking. We ended up walking around the market together, and when he asked for my number, my first instinct was to run. But something made me stay, made me take that risk. "I should warn you," I blurted as he entered my number in his phone. "I'm still recovering from a bad breakup. I'm not sure I'm ready for anything complicated." He didn't miss a beat. "How about we start with something simple then? Coffee. I promise not to bring up anything more emotionally charged than pastry preferences." His response, respectful of my boundaries but gently humorous, made me feel safe enough to say yes. Our coffee date turned into lunch, which turned into weekly farmers market trips, which somehow evolved into this cautious, tender thing we're building now. We've been seeing each other casually since then. Leo is nothing like Daniel. He listens, really listens. When I talk, he asks questions about my work and remembers details about the manuscripts I'm editing. When I mentioned my newfound interest in personal finance, he didn't dismiss it or take over. He shared that he's still paying off student loans and asked if I had any tips. But Leo isn't perfect, and that's actually comforting. He's chronically late to everything, leaves dirty dishes to soak for days, and has what I can only describe as a reckless optimism about money that occasionally makes my anxiety spike. Last month, we had our first real argument when he casually mentioned wanting to take a summer trip to Japan. We could just put it on credit cards and figure it out later, he said with a shrug. "That's what they're for, right?" I felt like I'd been doused in cold water. "No," I said sharply. "That's not what they're for. That's how people end up in debt they can't escape." He looked startled by my vehemence, and I immediately regretted my tone. But instead of getting defensive, he asked, "Can you help me understand why this upsets you so much?" So I told him. Everything. About Daniel, the theft, the financial abuse, my Phoenix plan. I hadn't meant to share it all, but once I started, I couldn't stop. Last week, I finally told him about Daniel and the theft. We were making dinner at his place. He was teaching me how to make risotto, a slow process that requires patience and constant attention. I was nervous about his reaction, afraid he'd see me differently once he knew how thoroughly I'd been deceived. Instead, he put down his wooden spoon, took my hands in his, and said, "Megan, what happened to you was financial abuse, plain and simple. It doesn't reflect on your intelligence or your worth. It reflects on his character, not yours." I cried right there in his kitchen, the risotto momentarily forgotten. Not because I was sad, but because I felt seen in a way I hadn't in so long. Maybe ever. Leo and I are taking things slowly. I'm still healing, still learning to trust both others and myself. But for the first time since Daniel, I can imagine a future that includes partnership without erasure of self. Not everything is perfect, of course. I still have moments of doubt and fear. I still check my bank account compulsively. I still sometimes wake up from dreams where Daniel is standing over me, telling me I'm not enough. And then there's the news I received last week from Mark, Tara's husband. He called me out of the blue, something he's never done before. "I thought you should hear this from a friend," he said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. Daniel and Alexis broke up. Apparently, she caught him moving money from their joint account into his personal one. I sat down hard on my couch, a strange ringing in my ears. History repeating itself. Daniel hadn't changed, he just found a new target. Mark went on to say that Alexis had confronted Daniel with evidence, and unlike me, she'd immediately involved lawyers. Daniel's firm had placed him on administrative leave pending an investigation into whether he'd mishandled client funds as well. "I feel like such an idiot for not seeing who he really was," Mark continued. "All those years and I never realized." "Don't," I interrupted. "We see what we expect to see in people we care about." I was surprised by the lack of satisfaction I felt. A year ago, I would have celebrated Daniel's downfall. Now I mostly felt tired and worried for Alexis, a woman I'd once envied and resented. That night, I did something I never thought I would. I found Alexis on LinkedIn and sent her a message. "You don't know me, but we have something in common. If you ever want to talk to someone who understands what you're going through, I'm here." I don't know if she'll respond, but reaching out to her felt like reclaiming some of the power Daniel had taken from me. I couldn't help myself then, but maybe I could help someone else now. I sat down hard on my couch, a strange ringing in my ears. History repeating itself. Daniel hadn't changed, he just found a new target. Mark went on to say that Alexis had confronted Daniel with evidence, and unlike me, she'd immediately involved lawyers. Daniel's firm had placed him on administrative leave pending an investigation into whether he'd mishandled client funds as well. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt a complex tangle of emotions. Sadness for Alexis, anger that Daniel was still hurting people, and a strange, hollow relief that it truly hadn't been my fault. I wasn't uniquely gullible or naive, I just loved someone who didn't deserve that love. I told Dr. Lin about the call in our next session. We've scaled back to meeting twice a month now, but I still value her perspective. How does this news change your narrative about what happened? She asked. It was a profound question. For so long, even as I rebuilt my life, part of me still believed Daniel's assessment of me. That I was financially naive, that I wasn't smart enough, that I somehow deserved what happened. But knowing he'd done the same thing to someone he'd publicly called his cool, someone with financial expertise, shifted something fundamental in my understanding. It was never about me, I told Dr. Lin. It was always about him. She smiled. That's an important realization. And what does that mean for your future? I thought about my growing savings account, my flourishing career, my balcony garden, my new friends, and Leo's patient, respectful presence in my life. It means I get to define my worth now, I said. Not Daniel, not anyone else, just me. A year ago I was sleeping on my sister's pull-out couch, feeling like my life had ended. Today I'm building a new life, one that reflects who I truly am, not who someone else wanted me to be. It hasn't been easy, and I know the journey isn't over. But for the first time since that devastating night, I'm genuinely excited to see what comes next. Final update, see 2 years later. The full circle, it's been 2 years since Daniel walked out of my life, taking our joint savings and leaving behind the shattered pieces of what I thought was our future. I wasn't planning on posting another update, but something happened last weekend that feels like the closing of a circle, and I wanted to share it with the community that helped me through my darkest days. First, though, let me catch you up on where life has taken me. I'm now the editorial director of our memoir division at the publishing house, position created specifically for me after the success of several projects I championed. I oversee a small team of editors, and watching them grow in their roles gives me a satisfaction I never expected to find in my career. The financial literacy I've developed has helped me negotiate a salary that reflects my value, and I no longer flinch when discussing money in professional settings. My resilience narratives imprint has published 12 titles, 3 of which have become bestsellers. Last month, I was invited to speak at a publishing conference about identifying authentic voices in trauma literature. As I stood at the podium, I realized I'd come full circle. From someone whose voice had been systematically diminished to someone who now amplifies the voices of others. I've even started working on my own book, part memoir, part financial self-defense guide for women. My agent, yes, I have an agent now, calls it empowerment with teeth. Writing it has been both therapeutic and terrifying, forcing me to revisit moments I'd rather forget, but also helping me recognize just how far I've come. My apartment feels truly like home now. I've painted the walls, hung art that speaks to me, and filled the space with books and plants and mementos from trips I've taken on my own, or with friends. My balcony garden has expanded to include a small vertical herb wall that provides fresh basil and mint for summer cocktails when friends come over. And Leo has become the most wonderful constant in my life. We moved in together 6 months ago, a decision I approached with both excitement and trepidation. The process of combining our lives, deciding whose furniture to keep, how to share expenses, whether to have joint accounts, triggered some old anxieties. But Leo suggested we work with a financial counselor to create a system that felt secure and equitable for both of us, and the transparency of that process was healing in ways I hadn't anticipated. The counselor helped us navigate our different approaches to money, my newfound caution versus Leo's more relaxed attitude. Financial compatibility isn't about having identical habits, she explained. It's about creating systems that respect both partners' needs and values. For Leo, that meant learning to budget more carefully and understanding why financial surprises trigger my anxiety. For me, it meant learning that some spontaneity is healthy and that controlling every penny isn't necessarily security. It can be another form of fear. We still have occasional tensions. Last month, Leo forgot to transfer his portion of the rent money until the last minute, sending me into a brief panic spiral. But instead of interpreting his oversight as a sign of disrespect, as I might have once done, I recognized it as simple absent-mindedness and addressed it directly. And instead of dismissing my concern as Daniel would have done, Leo apologized sincerely and set up automatic transfers for future payments. We have separate accounts for our individual expenses and savings, and a joint account for household costs that we contribute to proportionally based on our incomes. Every Sunday evening, we sit down with coffee to review our budget and discuss any upcoming expenses. These conversations, which would have terrified me 2 years ago, have become a comfortable ritual that reinforces our partnership. Leo proposed 3 weeks ago, during a weekend trip to a coastal town we both love. It wasn't an elaborate production. Just the two of us walking along the beach at sunset when he stopped, took both my hands, and told me that loving me had taught him what true partnership means. The ring he offered was his grandmother's, reset with a small but perfect sapphire, because he remembered me once mentioning that I preferred colored stones to diamonds. I said yes without hesitation. The girl who once thought she'd never trust again is planning a wedding to a man who has shown her what real trust looks like. But that's not why I'm writing this update. Last Saturday, Leo and I were at an industry gala, a black tie fundraiser for literacy programs that my publishing house sponsors annually. I was nervous about attending. These events always attract people from across the publishing and legal worlds, and I knew there was a chance Daniel might be there. But I refused to let that possibility keep me from celebrating my company's philanthropic work. The evening was going beautifully. My team had secured a major author for the keynote address, and her speech about the power of storytelling to heal trauma had the entire ballroom captivated. I was standing near the back, watching with pride, when I felt a presence beside me. Megan. I didn't need to turn to know who it was. His voice, once so central to my world, now seemed to come from a distant past. I took a deep breath and faced him. Daniel looked both the same and utterly different. The same handsome features, the same expensive suit, but there was something diminished about him. The confident gleam in his eye had been replaced by something harder, more desperate. My heart hammered against my ribs, and for a moment, I was back in our apartment, sinking onto the couch as he told me I wasn't enough. I felt a flash of the old fear, the old inadequacy. But then I noticed something. My hands weren't shaking. My voice when I spoke was steady. Daniel, I acknowledged, meeting his gaze directly. 2 years ago, I would have looked away, made myself smaller. You look well? He said, his eyes traveling from my face to my dress. A deep blue gown I'd splurged on because it made me feel powerful. And then to Leo, who was across the room chatting with colleagues but keeping a watchful eye on our interaction. I am well. I replied, surprised by how true it was. Despite the adrenaline coursing through me, I felt grounded, present. Very well, actually. An awkward silence stretched between us. In that pause, I observed him more carefully. The confident lawyer who had once made me feel so inferior now seemed almost nervous, shifting his weight from foot to foot. I heard about your promotion, he finally said. Editorial director. That's impressive. The compliment felt hollow, manipulative. The old Megan might have grasped at it, grateful for his approval. But I just nodded, waiting. Daniel never initiated conversations without a purpose. Look, he continued, lowering his voice, I know things ended badly between us. I've been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of work on myself. He gave a self-deprecating laugh that once would have melted me. Therapy, support groups, the whole 9 yards. I noticed the slight tremor in his hand as he reached for a champagne flute from a passing server. This was new. Daniel had always been so controlled. I'm glad to hear that, I said, and meant it. Whatever his motives for this conversation, genuine healing would benefit everyone in his orbit. I've been trying to make amends, he continued, part of my recovery process. He looked at me with what seemed like genuine regret. What I did to you was wrong, Megan. I was controlling and manipulative. I stole from you. Not just money, but years of your life, your confidence, your sense of self. I felt a strange vertigo, hearing him articulate exactly what I'd come to understand through months of therapy. Part of me wanted to accept this apparent apology, to offer forgiveness and walk away cleansed. But something felt off. Why are you telling me this now, Daniel? I asked. He looked down at his drink. Honestly, I'm in trouble. The firm found out about some questionable financial decisions I made. After what happened with Alexis, they did a deeper audit. He swallowed hard. I could lose my license. But if some of my if people I've hurt would vouch for my character, my commitment to change. And there it was. Not an apology, transaction. He was still trying to use me, just in a different way. I felt a complex wave of emotions. Disappointment that he hadn't truly changed, anger at his audacity, but also a strange, sad compassion. Daniel was still trapped in the same patterns, still seeking external solutions to internal problems. I can't do that, Daniel, I said quietly but firmly. I hope you find the help you need, but it won't come from me. His expression hardened, a flash of the old Daniel breaking through the contrite facade. I thought you of all people would understand second chances, he said, a hint of accusation in his tone. After all, I helped build your career, those connections I introduced you to. The networking events I brought you to. You wouldn't be standing here without me. 2 years ago, those words would have crushed me, reinforced every doubt I had about my own worth. But now, they simply confirmed what I already knew. Daniel hadn't changed at all. My success is my own, I said, my voice steady. And I earned it despite you, not because of you. I saw a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He wasn't used to this version of me, the one who stood her ground, who knew her worth. Before he could respond, I felt a warm hand on the small of my back. Leo had appeared beside me, his presence solid and reassuring. He didn't interrupt or try to rescue me. He simply stood with me, a quiet show of support. Leo. This is Daniel, I said calmly. Daniel, my fiancé Leo. The two men exchanged brief nods. Daniel's eyes flicked to the ring on my finger, then back to my face. Something shifted in his expression, a realization, perhaps that I had truly moved on, that the power he once held over me was gone. Congratulations, he said stiffly. I should get going. It was good to see you, Megan. As he walked away, I felt no triumph, no vindication, just a profound sense of closure. The circle that began with his betrayal had finally closed, not with dramatic confrontation or tearful reconciliation, but with the quiet strength of knowing exactly who I am and what I deserve. Leo squeezed my hand. You okay? He asked. I took a deep breath and realized that I was, truly, deeply okay. Yes, I said, smiling up at him. I'm perfect. Later that night, as Leo and I walked home along the river, I told him about the encounter. You know what the strangest part was? I said. I actually felt sorry for him. Leo looked thoughtful. That's because you've healed, he said. When we're still wounded, we want others to hurt too. When we've healed, we can see their pain without taking it on. His words stayed with me, a perfect distillation of the journey I've been on these past 2 years. I've moved from victim to survivor to someone who is truly thriving. Not because the wound never existed, but because I've learned to integrate it into the tapestry of who I am. To those of you who are just beginning this journey, who are where I was 2 years ago, please know this: your worth is not determined by someone else's ability to see it. The person who betrayed you did not break you. They revealed your capacity to rebuild, stronger and wiser than before. And to those who have walked this path alongside me, sharing your own stories of loss and recovery, thank you. Your courage has been a light in dark places, a reminder that none of us heal alone. I won't be posting any more updates here. This chapter of my life is complete. But I carry with me the lessons of these 2 years that true security comes not from controlling others but from knowing yourself. That vulnerability and strength are not opposites but companions, that our worth is inherent, not earned or granted by another's approval. The money Daniel stole, I'll never get it back. But what I've gained in its place is beyond measure self-knowledge, true partnership, meaningful work, and the unshakable certainty that I am enough, exactly as I am. And that, as it turns out, is worth everything.